Thank you all so much. My name is Tyrone Davis. I'm the Director of Education and Engagement at Center Theater Group, and we're so happy to have all of you here to join us for this conversation, Asian American Representation, the Politics of Casting. This conversation is inspired by David Henry Hwang's new play, Soft Power, which opens at the Ahmanson Theatre on May 3rd. Hope to see all of you there. Okay. We're so happy to partner with East West Players on these conversations. It presented the opportunity for us to really have a chance to have a dialogue about the ideas and themes in the play. And so it's my honor to introduce our moderator for this evening. He is a director, an actor, a moderator, facilitator, Marcos Nahara.
Thank you, everybody. Well, come on out. Will you please go ahead and welcome our panelists? I have to tell you all, we're a chatty group back there, so we almost missed our entrance, but you guys sound like pretty chatty out here, too. Are you ready to talk? Yes. Thank you again. So my name is Marcos Nahara, and I'm so happy and honored to be here with this wonderful group of artists here tonight. We have been talking kind of nonstop for about an hour, and because there's a lot to be said about this, right? You know, how we show up as people of color, specifically as Asian Americans in our stories here in America, and how we don't show up, right? So we want to get right, right? Absolutely. So we want to get right to it. What I want to tell you first is how the night will go. We'll have about a half an hour of conversation, all of us up here, and then we're going to switch gears a little bit and we're going to do something special. We have a special treat because we have the two hosts of that amazing podcast, They Call Me Bruce, here on stage. And they're going to lead us in a special segment of that. And then we'll use our time at the end to have a Q&A. All right, so start thinking of your questions, formulating them. And this is a brave space, so whatever you want to ask is absolutely cool with us. Is that fair to say, panelists? Yeah, all right, good.
Did you say brave space?
Brave space.
Oh, that's awesome, okay.
Versus what?
versus safe space.
Brave is better than safe, frankly, yeah.
I'll give credit there. I'll give that to the wonderful Leslie Ishu, who's a wonderful Asian American. Yes, absolutely. She taught me that. She's like, you know, we can be brave. We can have brave spaces, which I love. So speaking of, we have 4 brave, amazing panelists tonight. So I'd like them each to say hello and tell us a little bit about who they are.
All right. I am Jeff Yang. I am, as Marcos mentioned, co-host with Phil Yu of the podcast They Call Us Bruce. I am also author, journalist, celebrity dad.
Do we all know that? Tell them who your son is.
My son plays Eddie Hwang on Fresh Off the Boat on ABC's 8:30 on Tuesdays.
So now, aren't you known as his dad, basically?
I am Hudson Yang's father. Yes.
Hi, everyone. I'm Alice Tuan. I'm a playwright and a teacher. And I'm very jet-lagged because I just got back from Africa, where I facilitated the Almasi African Playwrights Conference, which I can talk a little bit more if it is.
No, go ahead, because, you know, otherwise we're not going to know what it is, so please tell us, yeah.
Oh, it's new. It was in Zimbabwe, in Harare, in the capital there. And 3 playwrights worked on their new plays, of which the topics were prophet churches, migrant workers through a female lens, and then intense inquiry into African identity, AKA, are the whites considered African too? And it's great because, you know, Zimbabwe just had a coup not coup. That's what they call it. They call it the coup not coup, or the not coup, or the not cuckoo.
That doesn't even sound right, Alice.
And so Robert Mugabe was, you know, asked to step aside. And so now it's actually, it kind of dawned on me that facilitating not only just like the plays to like progress to their next drafts, but then seeing them in front of the Harare audiences and the conversation that it sparked is like, oh, now that they're like not underfoot anymore and the door has opened, plays and talking about new plays and their issues through theater is actually a great way to kind of sculpt a new identity. So, yeah, so that was, okay.
Alice Tuan, everybody.
I live a very shallow life.
On many TV shows.
On many TV shows. I'm an actor, playwright, and director. And I'm a single mom of a teenager who is graduating this year, thank God. And I'm very interested in this topic always. I'm interested in everything because everything, the older you get, everything gets gray. You start thinking about all the different sides of issues where it was so nice and black and white when I was young. And it's not anymore. There's so many different things to think about. You can go back. I can't. Going back into my Disney life. And I'm older, and it's harder to think about stuff so deep. But I want to. And so I'm here. Thank you.
Welcome, Amy Hill.
Love
Thank
you, Amy.
I'm going to be brave.
Yes. And lastly, Phil Yu.
Hey, everybody. My name is Phil Yu. I'm the other half of They Call Us Bruce. Look for us on Apple Podcasts. But I also run a blog called Angry Asian Man. It is running it
Fans
for,
of Angry Asian Man? Yes.
Woo!
Fantastic.
Next month have been running it for 17 years. So
Are you still angry?
That's a fair question.
depending on. Now I'm just tired. I think we're just changing the titles and be Tired Asian Man.
Tired Asian Man is
Exhausted.
a blog for our life.
Yeah,
our life
Tired
stage
gray
now.
Asian.
Exhausted. Yeah, and so but I'm that I've been doing that. That's kind of what I do, and so now I'm like professional angry Asian man, I guess.
Well, please.
Related to the angry little Asian girl?
Oh, don't.
Oh,
do
let's
not
not go
ask.
there.
It's another Asian blog.
It's an angry family split.
Okay.
Well, as you can see, this panel is definitely ready to throw it on the floor, right? So before we go there, I wanted to see if we could just take a quick trip down memory lane, everybody. And I wanted to start by asking you a little bit about stories, because we're all storytellers on this stage. And we love stories, we love hearing them, and we love seeing them and experiencing them. So I'd like to know, what was the first story somebody read to you or told you with an Asian American character as the protagonist, the main character? So digging back deep to childhood days.
And we're talking about reading to us, not that we read ourselves. This is like in bed, our hardworking parents and or grandparents or nannies or whatever is telling us something about our own culture, right? I actually think that the first book that had Asians in it that I was read, like the picture, not Asian Americans, right? Was that terrible 10 Chinese Brothers book where it was this
I guess people know that one, yeah?
freaky set of identical Chinese brothers, each of whom had some deformity / superpower. And they managed to actually utilize their respective uniquenesses to get out of a lot of trouble. I think it actually led me down the path of consciously kind of being interested in supernatural humans and superhumans in general. But it also led me to realize, just from what I remember those pictures of the books, that white people don't look at Asians and see quite the same thing I see when I look in the mirror. It's a lot yellower, for one.
Good. Well, thank you. Friends?
My parents didn't really read books to me. They told me stories, but my parents are Chinese, and so I heard Chinese stories. But this is specifically Asian American that you're talking about, or?
That's actually a great clarifying question. How about the first story where there was an Asian character as the main character?
Yeah, because I grew up in a Chinese household, so it was,
All the stories?
Yeah, most of the stories, yeah. Although my mom did read Peter Pan to me, but there's no Asian characters in it. There's an Indian, I think. There's a
lot of stereotypes in that one.
But
So more traditional stories for you.
Yeah, more traditional, and I guess if anything, it's just on TV. I fried on television.
Okay, hold on that, because we're going to get to that. Amy, Phil?
Well, my mother was Japanese, so I'm pretty sure it was fairy tales. Momotaro, which is Peach Boy. Mm-hmm. That was the first, but then there was a whole bunch of them, and they were all sort of magical realism, like a boy comes out of a peach. Made sense to me. And then was raised by these two old people in the woods, and then he went on these adventures. And yeah, so, I thought that, but they were always positive ideas about, and then there was nothing, on television. There was no other Asians. In fact, in my community, there were no Asians. So the only Asian I knew was a Peach Boy.
Did you read that story to your daughter?
I did. But of course, I read all of those Japanese fairy tales. I love Japanese fairy tales. But then I grew into loving other fairy tales, too. I just loved fairy tales. And then I look back and think, oh, they were so violent, and they were very dark.
But that didn't matter to you at the time, though, no?
No, I didn't see the darkness. Of course a witch is going to eat the kids. Makes sense. I don't know all these things as a child.
Thank you.
Good.
Phil.
I had real trouble recalling, honestly, of a story that was read to me or told to me that involved Asians. And then I had to reach deep in the recesses of my memories. And the only thing I could think of is actually one time when, and I was really little, but relatives came from Korea, and as a gift, they gave me like this storybook, and it was like a storybook of like this cartoon. Presumably it was a Japanese cartoon, but it was from Korea, and it was all written in Korean. And it was like robots and space people, people. It's like a Voltron-esque type, story. And I just thought, this is cool. Like Korean stories are cool,
And thank you for sharing that with us, because the next question that I wanted to ask was, jumping back again, what was the first television show or film or even play that you saw where there was an Asian American or Asian character as the protagonist? And I will add a caveat to that, a character that you were proud of. Because we all know those stereotypical walk-on stereotypes that we've dealt with, so we know those already.
So, I've shared this on the podcast, and Phil and I have talked about it extensively. My exposure to Asians on celluloid, back when there was celluloid that people actually, put on screens, was through martial arts cinema, because my mom's youngest brother would, when he was supposed to be taking care of us, when he was going to college at the time, would actually sneak us out to Chinatown to watch these double features of martial arts films, and it was always like half the crowd was gangsters with beepers, and the other half was like old ladies with dried squid.
Also dangerous.
Also equally dangerous, if not more so. And then it was me and my sister when my sister came out, and my sister hated it, and I loved it. I just fell in love with this idea that this sort of fantastical display of kind of otherworldly and yet recognizable figures, people who were superhuman, but who looked like me, right? That changed my life. Television, on the other hand, was just a vast wasteland. The only two Asian Americans that I really remember on television were Jack Sue on Barney Miller, and
That's old school.
old school, and Arnold on Happy Days. So Pat Morita and Jack Suzuki, right? So,
Thank you.
Yeah, so my parents on the weekend would take me to Chinatown, and we'd go catch a double feature, usually a Run Shaw movie.
nice.
And
There we
so I saw a lot of the sword fighting movies, and to the point where I saw so many that every time I'd see like there'd be tiles, and like some of them would be plain and some would be the flowered ones, and if you step on the flowered ones, the spears would come out, and I was like, don't step on the flowered one, and it's like, no, it's a different movie now. It's like, or it'd always be like a revenge story, or and I just remember this one imbecile that would just keep always saying Birdo, which means I don't know in Chinese. And like, Birdo, in that Beijing accent. So I think that because my parents were so Chinese and they kept such a Chinese household, that, I was exposed, now that I think of it, now that you ask, I was exposed to a lot of Asian faces that way. But yes, on TV, I think it was more Trisha Toyota and Connie Chung in anchor spots. Not so much stories, but just, whenever there was someone Asian on TV, it would definitely stand out. And then
And for the
also
younger folk, I want to say that those are journalists, yes?
Oh yeah, they're journalists on, Connie Chung was on CBS and Trisha Todia was on ABC. And then Tiffany Chin and Christy Yamaguchi, the ice skaters, were
Which is this whole other topic. We'll talk about that.
Okay, wow.
We can go all over.
Well, my mom's Japanese, and so we had a little Japanese movie theater in Seattle, and we would go every weekend to catch a double feature. But they were good movies. They were Kurosawa films and Ozu and fancy, kind of fancy high-class stuff. And I learned how to read because of the subtitles. I could read fast. My teachers were stunned at how quickly I could read because I learned how to read that. But these were wonderful characters that were well drawn and rich and full, and the stories were wonderful. But my first crush was Yuzo Kayama. He was he was like a beach blanket. He was like a Bobby Darin of the Japanese world. They surfed and they wore bikinis and sang and danced and
Why don't we know about this? I want to.
Yuzo Kayama, Yuzo. It's cute. He had dimples. And my first American, the first person who really affected me, because I always wanted to act, sing, and dance, but I can't do singing and dancing, but I am acting, was Nancy Kwan from Flower Drum Song. And she was Hapa like me. Eurasian, as they said in those days. It's very exotic, Eurasian. So, Nancy Kwan, I loved her. I wanted to be her. And I've met her now, so my life is complete.
Thank you.
Well, for me, it has to be Bruce. It's Bruce Lee. First time I saw Bruce Lee, it was like the local station was doing like a marathon. Like every night was a different Bruce Lee movie, and then this was in the '80s, and so he'd been dead for like over 10 years, but this is the first time I ever seen it or heard of this guy Bruce Lee, and I was like, I remember watching it and being like, how come nobody told me about this guy? Like everyone is acting like, oh, it's just Bruce Lee. I'm like, what are you talking about? It's just Bruce Lee. I'm like this guy is amazing, Like I remember he was on TV that night, and then the next day at school, everyone was like talking about the Bruce Lee movies that were on. And I was like, it was just kind of he's like a superhero, He was amazing, and so that was a very vivid memory for me. Just like who acts like this, who looks like this, who moves like this, And then so that left an indelible impression on my whole life. And then and then the other ones I can like vividly recall are Sulu on Star Trek, and then Data from the Goonies. So.
Thank you. And and the reason why I asked that, because I wanted to know if we could figure out a way to connect the dots between those early stories we heard as kids, where they're relatively good stories, and connecting it now kind of to the more modern times where there's some walk-on stereotypes, but then we have in 2018 we have amazing characters like the ones that Amy plays and your son. Do you all think that the perceptions of Asian Americans, what is the challenge we're having right now in our country with the stories we're being told?
Maybe the storyteller first.
Well, when I was first approached about this panel, the first thing that came to my mind was just a kind of an organic, like reality-based, like in a hospital drama, why aren't there more Filipino nurses? It's kind of a no-brainer. It's actually reality. So that's like that's like a WTF. It's like, why is, I don't even understand.
One of my dream projects to see would be like a sitcom set in a hospital, where like the entire, like all, it's from the nurse's perspective, and they're all Filipino.
That's right.
Of course.
That's right.
That would be a documentary.
Yeah.
That's right.
And the doctors are South Asian.
Yeah.
Yes.
And then there's,
But then there's
there's
also
an odd white person here and there.
All the patients are white, and then everybody talks shit about them like behind their back.
Wow, did you just pitch it? Yeah. Pitch it.
Are there any producers in the house?
The other thing is, I remember when I saw The Bodyguard, the Whitney Houston movie, I thought, oh, Kevin Costner's character is actually very Asian. I just saw him as like there's a
Did
very...
anybody else think that? One person.
Yes, yes.
Isn't there a whole bit with like a samurai sword in that?
No,
Am I imagining that? There is, right?
Oh, was
yeah,
there?
Yeah.
Oh, I don't remember that. I just remember kind of like the energy and kind of like the stoicness and, you know, the vigilance. I don't know. There was something about him. I'm like, oh, that could have been played by an Asian. And so now it's like actually looking at, what was I was watching The View this morning at the gym, and it's like they were saying something about like Friends, the TV show. That could be cast with anybody. Yeah. And you don't have to change a word. Yeah.
They live in New York City. It's a city with no black or brown people in it, for whatever reason. So the fact that they have no, friends of color or whatever is I guess, just part and parcel of the bizarre dimension they live in. I will say, though, to the point of The Bodyguard, right? There actually was, in fact, this is just pulling out a little bit of the Library of Martial Arts, Jet Li actually did what was essentially a type of a remake of The Bodyguard called, I think it was called My Bodyguard.
It's called Bodyguard from Beijing.
Bodyguard from Beijing, right.
And who was he guarding?
A celebrity or something,
Chrissy
right?
Chung, yeah, it was a singer, celebrity. It was very similar in tropes, but it was more comic, and of course, there was martial arts. I mean, I've compare the two, it's like Kevin Costner to me is like the antidote to Asianness. It's like as far apart as I can imagine, because I think to me, yes, in like samurai films and so on and so forth, that stoicness is maybe the most common theme, but the Asian heroes that I grew up with were always incredibly expressive and colorful, and they were angry and they were sad and they were happy and they were comic, and all those things are just the reality I lived in. I was lucky in that sense that I didn't grow up solely on a diet of Asians in the corners and off stage.
But to that point, I guess masculinity has a stoicism in it, like all the John Waynes and the Gary Coopers. But I don't know. I guess now it's like, oh, there are roles that could easily be cast with Asians that are not. And so
but
we're going to have like one more Baywatch remake. Like we're just recycling old TV shows. Like why don't we just either cast new people in it, or why don't we go ahead and tell new stories?
If you had to put it out there, Alice, why is that not happening if it's such an easy solution? And that's for anybody on the panel.
I actually have an anecdote to share about that. Because, so when we shot the first season of Fresh Off the Boat, it was mid-season replacement, which means we shot all 13 episodes, and it was not a single episode aired by the time we finished production. And we had a wrap party. They invited, not just people from the studio and, network executives and so on and so forth, but friends of friends and so forth, other fairly high-placed studio executives and production people and so on and so forth, because it was very exciting that there was like a show, an Asian American show that was finally getting made and would have at least, 13 episodes, after 20 years of darkness since All American Girl. And I remember, one of the studio executives, I won't name names, came up to me and said, "Oh, you're the father of the star of the show. He's fantastic. We're really glad, to see this happening. There are so many projects with Asian Americans that I would love to make. We're hoping that Fresh Off the Boat is a hit so we can make them, right?" And
because it opens the door, essentially?
It was literally stating that we have great ideas with great talent attached that we cannot make until somebody else is successful. And that's the reason why these guys were here. Not because they were just being well-wishers to us, but because they wanted to see whether or not this strange unicorn of an Asian American show could actually happen, right? So I think that's part of it, that there's this conceptual challenge that Hollywood, and not just Hollywood, every discipline, it seems, every industry has to overcome to just think of an Asian American in that space, like you said, before they're willing to actually open the door and make it happen. It's visualization.
It happens because we live in a white country.
Less white all the time.
But the dominant culture is white, and it's gotten even more so. And I feel like it's all about money. And so people just want to do what's successful as opposed to take risks. I mean, I think that's across the board, taking risks.
Yeah, and I think it happens in theater as well, that, you know, they don't want to think outside the box. They know what they think will sell. So why would we take a risk and lose a lot of money? I know every theater is probably one show away from, you know, disaster. So they're always thinking about their subscribers and their, you know, base, and it happens in television and film. And what I've seen, and I talked to you over the phone too.
I was just going to ask.
Is that, you know, we have a little bit more visibility in television and film, but I feel as though sometimes the characters, because it's swung so far the other way, that, like, I love Fresh Off the Boat because they're not afraid of having Asian characters, like the grandma speaks in Chinese. I mean, this is the reality of our world. You know, we're a country that's filled with immigrants and people with accents and people from all over, and they sort of like are sometimes making us want to play white versions of ourselves. We look Asian, but we may not have an Asian name, we may not speak with an accent, where there's nothing differentiating us except for our faces. And I feel like sometimes when I go in, I want to create a character that's maybe got an accent. And they're like, no, we don't want to do an accent because, you know, we don't want this thing to be about the accent. And I'm like, well, if I'm doing it, you know, then I get all on my high horse. I think, I'm a good actor. I'm not doing it just for the accent. I'm doing it because I'm creating a character, and she maybe has, and I don't do that. I hopefully, well, maybe I do. Maybe y'all think I do. But I think I do different accents for each character, that they're not all the same person. It's not like well, except for sometimes when I'm Chinese, I'm not so good. But I kind of have my Judge Lillian Singh accent that I do. But they're based on real people. And so I'm offended by the fact that, you know, we're trying to, what would we call it? Bayesianize?
I said Bayesian. Is it?
Yeah, Bayesian. Like we're neutralizing everybody so that they're not people that I recognize either.
But your journey started a little bit different, which is what you were telling me over the phone, right? For example, like when you lived in Japan.
Oh, yeah. Well, when I lived in Japan, you know, I sort of blended in to the culture, and people would ask me why my English was so good, and I'd say, well, because I'm an American, and they'd say, right. And I'd have to show them my passport or my, you know, green card, the Japanese version of it. And then when I came here, when I came to Hollywood, and white people, I go in and audition for, you know, I started out at the Asian American Theater Company in San Francisco, did nothing but Asian American theater, did lots of different characters, you know, that were, sometimes had accents, sometimes they didn't. There was a lot of camp plays. Anyway, and then I moved down here, and white people, casting people would say, well, you don't look right. You don't look Asian. And I'd be sitting in the, you know, waiting room with other actors, coaching them on accents, teaching them Japanese. But, you know, it was like, and then I was on probation when I did All American Girl. They weren't sure whether I was gonna, you know, pass the test of being old and being Korean. And I worked really hard on making it hopefully a full, rich character. And, you know, and I feel like I managed to do a good job with that. And going into the Korean community, I felt so bad because they'd all be like, so is your mom Korean? Are you married to a white guy?
To this day, I mean, I thought you were Korean back then. Today, I'm surprised. I'm just hearing these stories right now. I'm like, what?
But I mean, I try really hard because I feel like I don't want to disappoint anybody in the community either. I'm playing a Filipina mom, and I work hard on that. I don't want it to be, you know, shallow and simplistic. But mostly I want her to be a real person. So, but I go into the community and I'd have to say my mom's Japanese, and I know the history of the Japanese Korean. I don't feel guilt a little I do, but you know, is it okay? But I'd feel like they'd go, what? And when I did my first film was with Hwang, and I was playing this Chinese American girl, and the same thing. It's always like people go, yes, and this is Amy. I think her mom's Chinese. And I'm like, Japanese. Anyway.
But let's be honest, though, right? I mean, when we can even get an Asian cast with an Asian actor is already kind of a coup, right? I mean,
yeah, but there has been controversy lately too, a little bit about cross casting within the Asian community.
Oh, but that's a sign of progress because we now finally have enough roles, so there's not just the one, right? And we can start seeing difference. We can start representing difference. I think to answer your question a little bit, a big reason why it's been so hard is because there's always only been the one. It's like Highlander, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
So if one is there and one fails, no more Asian American stuff ever. For 20 years, we'll salt the earth, right? If a white sitcom fails, is there no white TV and ever again?
If
That's
only.
not what happened.
Yeah.
But you must have been done really well, because by the end of the season of All American Girl, we were recounting, it's like they only retained Margaret and the grandma and then brought in 4 college white boys.
That's right.
And
because that's the formula that works.
It's like, where'd the
Time
family
and time
go?
again.
Time and time again.
We had some notes for the producers.
It makes so much sense. Margaret and the grandma
Move in with 4 white boys.
Yeah, so makes sense.
But that's the thing, not having
Yeah.
faith to allow something to cultivate and grow and to actually find an audience.
Yeah.
And I feel like sometimes it's like the market, it's like too focused on the market and not developing audience. Because audience takes a while to cultivate. You have to actually keep it on the same channel on the same night, at the same time slot for a while. You keep moving stuff around, then it's like, oh, it doesn't work. It's like, oh, no one can find it. Right? So, but I do have to say, it's, like kind of renegade roles like Rex Lee on Entourage, Lloyd, like that. And OMG, Josh Chan, right? I mean, to have a lead romantic Asian guy who sings and dances. And
Yeah, and those things were not intentional. It was just, she went to school in Torrance. And the prom king and the prom queen were both Asian American. So to her, the hottest, cutest people in school were Asian American. She wasn't thinking, I think this should be diverse. It was reflecting her experience. And I think probably the problem we have sometimes is that, these people creating shows are not only worried about their base, but they're worried about they don't have any experience with people of color except for as maids and housekeepers and servers.
They're just checking off boxes.
Yeah,
You know what I mean?
right.
I think it goes to what you were saying before about like, oh, no, we can't have accents. That's just this blanket sort of like overcautious statement of like, oh, I don't want to get that, like, I don't want to get that heat from the criticism that comes from that. It's like, that's not approaching with any kind of nuance about what real Asian Americans are like, right? I mean, someone who would just be like, accents, no way. Well, look, man, this is like, most of the Asian American community in the United States actually is limited English proficient. If you look at who is actually Asian in this country, and so that would be reflective of, of our community. But it's kind of like people just want. But the way that history has shown, like accents are played for laughs, and it is the joke. And so, given the history, that is sort of the blanket dismissal of that now, right?
Yeah, and I refused those roles because I think there's no hope. When I see a script that just has, bad English, it doesn't seem like it's like, where's the character? There's no character.
But can I push back a little, Amy? Because when we talked yesterday, I did ask her, she surprised me when she was sharing her story about making choices in the casting room about using accents. And I was surprised that you wanted actually to go there. Because, I asked her, isn't that kind of enforcing some stereotypes that are already out there? But you said no.
No, I think, maybe I didn't make it clear. I don't like when a script is already written with broken English.
Right.
Because usually it's a white person who doesn't really know, so it's like some standard weird random broken English, and I can't even figure out how to say these words because it doesn't resemble anything I recognize. So I don't appreciate that. I prefer a script that has perfect English, and if I'm chosen, I will, and they say, oh yes. Because when I did Crazy Ex-Girlfriend, they offered that to me, and I was like, yay. And I thought, how am I going to broach the Filipino accent thing? Because I'm not Filipino. But the writer of the episode called me and said, can you do a Filipino accent? And I went, I was the voice of Philippine Airlines for 6 years. Yes, I can.
An accent.
Yes, I had an accent.
Really? An accent.
A very slight,
What did it
a
sound
very...
like? What
We all want to hear it now, don't we? You know we do. Come on, Amy.
Give us a 30.
Philippine Airlines, the only way to fly. It's very subtle. So that the executives for Philippine Airlines in Manila are going, I think she went to Makati High School. I am also a champion. If you can find somebody who grew up in that culture, you're going to get more depth, more richness, more umami than me. I can only do as much as I can, but I'm doing it kind of from the outside. I'm creating a character that I know or recognize, but I'm probably using my mother. Like, I totally am using my mother. But there are outside elements that are specific to Filipino culture. But I have to create from something I know.
So in that case, was it about that you had the control to make a creative choice in the casting room? It wasn't put upon you.
For the Filipino? Mm-hmm. Well, no, he asked me if I could do it. And then I literally, he's part of the producing staff, this person who wrote the script. Rene Gube. Yeah. Yes, he's lovely. But, he's there, and I ask him, and also Josh is there, and I ask them. And I remember working with Lea Salonga, and she corrected, the pronunciation of some auntie that I was using. She's like, it's pronounced. And I'm like, okay. Thanksgiving was filled with Filipinos. All the extras were Filipino, and I'm like sweating. Damn. Anyway, so.
Thank you. No, and
Yeah.
it makes me wonder a little bit for Phil and Jeff. Did you all start your podcast in a way to kind of like take over the narrative about how Asian Americans are being talked about?
Masculinity.
Betrayed.
Was it about masculinity?
We definitely don't talk about masculinity. It's like,
you have Bruce.
I think Asian American masculinity should stand for itself, right? I think that people who try to, sort of try too hard in some ways, end up aping the masculinity of other races, other ethnicities, and overcompensating. As Bruce said, be like water, my friend. Phil can maybe share the story of where they call us Bruce.
We started it because Jeff and I are obsessed with this stuff, this conversation we're having here. And we've been doing it, like, between the two of us for decades, and then...
Aren't you tired of having this conversation, though?
I think that...
we're tired of the Latino community, I will tell you about that.
I think the conversation is just starting to get real good right now.
It is, yeah.
And,
What's changed it?
if we're going to go in that direction, I think, look, so we've been talking about, like, collectively for a long time. I've been running my blog for almost 17 years. For a long time, it felt like I was shouting into the void, and I was just that guy on the internet who just, like... people would be like, there's that angry guy, right? But then it now seems like people are listening. We're having a conversation. It's not falling on deaf ears. And then you actually see, like, change and reaction happening because of it, especially even within our own community. People are like, yeah, I agree. That is wrong. We should say something about that. Whereas maybe before it did not quite feel as reactive or even, we didn't even have that sense of empowerment,
Before Phil launched his blog, literally right before Phil launched his blog, I was running a magazine called A Magazine. It was a print paper magazine, ink on paper. Just explaining it for you guys, millennials back there. So I was like shouting into like paper, you know what I mean? And
that's old school, man.
and it wasn't even just that people didn't care. Literally, when you talked to filmmakers and actors, a lot of what you got was like, well, yes, I'm an Asian American and I'm an actor. I don't consider myself an Asian American actor. I'm an actor who happens to be Asian American.
right? And that's because they were protecting, in a way, themselves from the reality that if you own the niche, you get boxed into the niche. And back then, to be boxed in the niche meant never getting the opportunity to be above the line, never starring, in a cast, never even being an ensemble player, a lead ensemble player, because there was no roles for Asian Americans who dared to be Asian American. You kind of had to find a way to be seen as the one who stuck their head out of the box. And so it was many years of that before we even got to the point where somebody could stand up and be angry and have and have people click. Here we are now.
Well, I feel I'm lucky that I came from the Asian American Theater Company, because that was all about, telling our stories and, celebrating who we are. So when I came to Hollywood, it was like, what the fuck is this? And I also felt like that with other Asian American actors, because I felt like they were also, trying to kowtow to the man. And I thought, we gotta rise up. And I think the thing that changed stuff was the Cameron McIntosh Miss Saigon controversy. All these people that I never saw ever get angry about anything.
Everybody was mad.
Oh my God, they were all mad. It was really quite wonderful to see that movement really start within the acting community.
I think that it takes something like that for everybody. Everybody has their Miss Saigon, or everybody has their, like for a lot of folks that I know, the Last Airbender was a really big thing that made them jump onto because they were like, I love this cartoon. No. A lot of people were like, I love this cartoon. I can't believe they're doing this, and I'm really mad about it. And people, it was a good entryway for people to be like, you think that's bad? Look, Hollywood's been doing this for a very long time, right. And then all of a sudden they're like, no shit, you're right. And then it just, from there it kind of, it opens up a whole new sort of army, if you will, of people who are willing to get angry about that stuff.
There's a generation of people being radicalized right now by Iron Fist, and
but yeah, it's true, right? And the more conversations like this take place on stages, especially, and in ways where people can hear that this conversation has been going on for a long time, the more it feels less like people screaming in the wilderness and more like a force to contend with.
Which does make me wonder, Jeff, do you think the landscape is going to be different for your son? Or is he still facing some of the similar things that we're talking about tonight?
I think it's already different for my son. I mean, this is a kid who rolled out of bed one day and said he wanted to be on TV. And I gave him the talk, which was, I know a lot of Asian American actors. They're fantastic bartenders. And as hard as you work, you're going to have doors slammed in your face. I'm going to support you all the way, all right? But just be ready. You'll audition 100 times, get one call back. You'll get, called back again 50 times. You'll get one role, and that role will be third waiter from the left. And you know what? It'll be fine, because eventually you'll go up, you'll move up, things will change. First waiter. Head chef. But, first audition he rolls out, and he's like, he gets on national TV, and literally the first thing he says to me is, I thought you said this was going to be hard, Dad. I love you, son, if you're listening.
But this fulfills the quotient. We always have to mention him on every episode. They call
Hudson Yang, my friends. But the reality is this. It's not just him. And we've talked about this before, too. There's an entire generation of kids who are growing up in this space under the age of 15 who do not have the scars, in some ways, around their Asian Americanness, who are really comfortable and confident and natural as Asian Americans, who are in this space today, who are acting today, and who are amazing. And when they come of age, everything's going to be different.
And don't you think...
And the writers, and the producers, and the directors, and I'm so excited about that.
The playwrights.
And the playwrights.
But don't you think that everyone can curate their entertainment now because of the internet, TV is not the only thing anymore. So it's like how we're represented on TV, on the stages. It's like those are like old forms. You could just go on the internet and you could see stuff from China, Korea, Japan. It's like you can see yourself on the screen.
Doctor.
Yeah.
Soft power.
Soft power. Good Doctor was a K-drama before Daniel Day Kim adapted it for American television.
And so do you all think that now, as we move forward, because there's so much more demand for content, and that people actually have a little bit of agency to choose what they're watching, don't you think that the representations, there's going to be more and more diverse and, of all genres? Do you have that optimism?
I do. Sure. It's already happening. I mean,
I do too. I do have the optimism, and I feel as though, certain people like Daniel Day Kim and David Hwang are now working on a project together for another show on television that is an Asian American family. I don't know the details of everything. And then, and they might have told me and I forgot because I'm old and I forget everything. But I feel like there's a lot of hope, especially there've always been acting talent, but now it's the people who can put that talent in front of the camera that counts.
And what about, I want to kind of close this portion of the night, anyway, our conversation, by turning to theater. Alice, do you think there's hope for the theater?
Every generation says that theater is dead. And it's still around after 2,000 years, after the Greeks. I feel like now more than ever, as we get more technologized and mechanized, theater is actually going to have this incredible renaissance where people will crave going to the theater, sitting next to humans, watching humans on stage, interacting molecularly. I feel like that is actually going to be something after people are glazed over, that they'll crave just live performance. And I think that live performance, there's the regular stage play with the subscription and such, but then there's now the whole immersive theater, like the Sleep No Mores and the Yuval Sharon. He's done amazing work here with Invisible Cities and then Hopscotch, and I guess he just did War of the Worlds. I feel, and then I just read a Brendan Jacobs Jenkins play called Gloria, where there's a lead that's a female Asian, and then that same character is kind of in the Junk Bond play, the Ayad Akhtar, this new play, also has a very high-powered Asian woman. So I guess that might be a variation of the Dragon Lady, but those roles are so well-written and so playable and so interesting. And I feel like with the Lauren Yees and the Christopher Chens, and Young Jean Lee, there's this whole postmodern kind of take on identity. They're a little bit removed from identity. It's why get so what do you call it? Discombobulated and flabbergasted by the identity thing. They're one kind of step removed and being able to be very meta. And I think David Hwang now is doing all the meta stuff. Again, he's appeared in another one of his plays.
So you're keeping hope alive.
Well, I just feel like as long as we have this craving to connect with another human, that we're not avatars that just go into a fetal position and plug a thing in and we go into our second world, which, I think there's a whole population that could do that. But I feel like one day the juice is going to run out and we're going to have to sit around the campfire and still tell each other stories and do improvs for each other and sing karaoke for each other without the karaoke machine. It's going to be a cappella. We're going to when China gets too powerful, they're going to round up the Chinese and put us into camps, but we'll have workshops and we'll be able to write plays from within the camp that aren't campy. We always want to express and I feel like sometimes, especially as an actor, you're waiting for someone to say, yes,
well, that's how
you
I
can.
started writing.
Yeah, given permission to express your power. And I feel like now, I don't know, the whole Hollywood machinery, it is machinery. And now that we do have YouTube and we have cable and we have all these other outlets, I just feel like now's the time to really go ahead and tell your story, go ahead and write it, be funny, everybody, whether you're going to do it or not, you should do it anyway, whether you're going to make money from it or not. And I love the Stephen Sondheim quote. I'm going to paraphrase, but I can get it down to 6 words. It's like, you, true. If it's you and true, then it's new.
If it's you and true, then it's new.
Wow.
Yes.
That's it. But I can only remember 6 words at a time. So like, if
Ladies and gentlemen.
and it's true, then it's new.
Thank you. Can we take a moment to please thank Jeff Yang, Alice Chuan, Amy Hill, and Phil Yu. Wonderful. So good. So good. We're going to move on to our next part of the show, which we have the gentlemen from They Call Us Bruce podcast who are going to lead us in a live taping of the segment. Is that our treat for tonight? Is that true?
Well, we've been taping this all along, I guess, but we do a special thing in our show. And we call it, it's kind of like our lightning round in some ways. It takes a long time for a lightning round. But it's called The Good, the Bad, and the WTF. And what it is our roundtable format conversation, which we essentially take a topic and look at it 3 different ways. And Phil, what are the 3 different ways in which we look at this particular topic?
So one is obviously it's good, right? So today we're going to be talking about the politics of casting Asian American representation. So we'll be approaching it the good. We'll pose it. We'll just leave it open, so anybody who wants to answer can answer. When we talk about this topic, what is good? What makes you? What delights you? What gives you hope? What is amazing about that? Then we'll move on to the bad. What is something that makes you, that darkens your soul, that makes you very sad? It can be something that happened to you. You can share an anecdote. You can share just a trend you see, or just some bad feelings you have on it. And then the WTF, which is something that is not necessarily good or bad. It's just something that puzzles you, that still makes you scratch your head. And so we can start with the good.
Let's start with the good.
Let's open it up.
There are good things about Asian American casting.
I know, there are good.
I'll start, because we just talked about this a little while ago, but I will say that the one casting coup that I think has impacted me more deeply than any other in blockbuster cinema over the course of this last year has been the casting of Kelly Marie Tran as Rose. Rose Tico in the latest Star Trek and Star Wars. And there's a reason for that. It's because we said it before in our podcast, but she isn't being cast for kind of an archetypal Asian American role. She doesn't have the flags you associate with Asian Americans, either heroic or villainous. She's not a stereotype or even an archetype. She actually feels more than anything else like an ordinary Asian American person a long, long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. And she's a stand-in in a lot of ways for all of us who were hero worshipers, who loved the iconic status of these films, but now for the first time are standing, literally at the edge of the stage and there with them. And Phil actually, when I mentioned this, noted that it's not just about what she does on screen, it's what she's been like off screen as well.
Yeah, I mean, she's totally... She acts like all of us who are Star Wars fans who suddenly stumbled onto a Star Wars set and then just got dressed up and got to be in the movie. You know what I mean? And she acts just like that. You're like, dude, she's loving every moment of this. It's incredible.
So loving her Asian Americanness, loving the fact that other people are loving it. We joked that she probably hangs out in Target just like to look at all the figures. It's like, that's because that's what we do. And that's something that gives us both hope and a new hope. Let's put it that way. Anybody else have something good?
No, that's so good.
There have been other casting coups, right?
Yeah, I guess, the thing that comes to my mind is, because I was just in Harare in Zimbabwe, and there's a Chinese community there that I didn't have time to go and talk to and research, but I do hear that there is a Chinese girl who's speaking Shona, which is the language there. Shona, they speak Shona and English, so they're bilingual there. But there's something about that, just hearing about her, because I definitely want to go back and just like find out what the Chinese are doing there, what they're, are they their own isolated selves or are they integrating there? But I'm fascinated by this girl who's speaking Shona, and now that the dictator has stepped down and the TV stations are supposedly going to open up and look for content, I don't know, is there room for a Chinese girl in Harari story that is not a casting coup Asian American in the United States, but that we have a representation in Africa in the African storytelling too? So that's something good. Mm-hmm. It's I sometimes feel like we in the United States, especially being away for a couple weeks, we're just so hyper racialized. We're hyper just identity, like when they talk about gay people, it seems like when you think about gay people, all the homophobes can only think about the sex act. They don't think of gay people as humans, who have arguments and who, cook. And, there's something about like we just hone in on the, like we're Puritan and then we're hyper racialized or hyper whatever we are, hyper categorized at the same time. And so is it any wonder that anybody can be more than a cardboard cutout, because we just keep honing in. And I feel like stereotypes are usually true, but they're stereotypes because they're like the same two details to describe a whole huge complex fabric of people. And that's why stereotypes are not good. We need to go look for more nuance and just like see humanity. It's like, the Cheeto in office now, it's like really making us appeal to our lizard minds. We've gotten small-minded, and as a reaction, we probably have to go the other way and enfleshen everybody who's different from you into actual human beings. I feel like that is the marrow of how we can start telling stories despite the market. I'm serious. Everybody go home, write down a story. Just start there. Just start there.
I have a good one. Do moderators count?
Yes,
Okay,
totally.
Moderators count.
Yay. I have a friend. His name is Stephen Canals, and he's a young Latino man from Brooklyn, gay. And he came out, he left his job as a teacher, where he knew that he needed to tell stories and kind of leave the academic environment. So he came out here, he went to a writing program, I think at UCLA, and he was like days away from going back to Brooklyn because he was down to like his proverbial like $16 in the bank account. And a story that he wrote in school got picked up by Ryan Murphy and will now be Pose, which is a show with transgender actors and people of color. Wow. And that, to me, is one of the most hopeful things I've heard in the last year. Well, that and she got to kiss the Black Jedi and
Yeah.
But that, for me, gave hope that, like, okay, there are stories coming out about queer people, people of color, that are nuanced, that aren't walk on stereotypes and aren't tired. So that's good.
I think that's actually at the core of a lot of the need, the hunger we have for roles that extend beyond that sort of the two dimensions that you're talking about. It's not that we don't want stereotypes or we don't want villains or bad people or hateful and ugly people.
Or accents.
Or accents. We want complicated people. We want people with nuance. We want people who you could say, these two people have the same logline, but they talk different, they look different. They are different people and they're played by different actors, and it's meaningful that that casting is different, not third weighted from the left, And that whole notion of looking beyond our myopia, we are a massive diaspora. It's not just to America. There are Asians in Latin America and in Africa. There are people who have boomeranged through the Caribbean and come here. There's so many stories that have not even been told within our own community, much less within the mainstream. So that's absolutely true.
Well, that gives me hope. There are people in, especially places of power, like Ryan Murphy, who are looking for these stories and accepting these stories and wanting to tell these stories but you guys have to write them, tell them so that they can be, as an actor, for sure, even 3 or 4 years ago, I was like, I'm just quitting. I'm quitting.
Seriously?
Oh, yeah, I was just going to do theater. That's how I'm quitting.
Okay.
Don't worry, I'm not quitting acting. I just quit. I just was like sick of the business. It was like I felt like they were paying me not to act, doing the third waiter from the left or whatever thing. It's just not worth the money. I would rather make no money. Well, I'd like to make a little.
You know that's
just a little. But theater was where I had the opportunities to make full, rich, interesting characters, to actually spend some time figuring stuff out. What the hell is this? Every time you start a play, you're like, what am I doing? Who am I? Where am I? And maybe by the end of the run, you go, oh, I think I might have figured something out. But, it's just the joy of that is what I'm missing oftentimes. These last few years, I've had many better opportunities to do richer characters, but I still love theater better.
I do have to say I did start writing because I wanted to write myself into the culture. It's like feeling like you're in a woman in a man's world, yellow in a white system. It's just like, oh, I need to write myself into the culture. And now the project is actually writing myself so that I am the dominant culture and then take it from there.
Well, I know we have more parts of the podcast. I just want to plant the seed here, everybody, that when we wrap up this part of the show, that we're going to have a little bit of time for question and answers, and there are microphones, right, on either side of the house here. Take it away, Jeff.
All right. So let's do bad, and let's do these kind of a little more lightning rowdy. I mean, we've all talked about a lot of bad already. Well, is there something particularly bad, a casting decision, a casting experience, something that you can actually share with us that exemplifies the darkest underbelly of casting?
I'll just do the no-brainer, the Scarlett Johansson and
Who's she?
Emma Stone.
These are like the greatest hits right here.
And Tilda Swinton. Yeah. She's an odd-looking person, but... and a great actress, but at the same time...
I think you should have been the ancient one.
Yes!
Dude,
you're not ancient enough. But
how awesome would that have been if Amy Hill played the ancient...
Oh my God, let's go back and we can CGI you into that.
Oh, no problem. I don't know. I probably just no makeup.
Hey, have you seen the clip of somebody who edited lightsabers into a Bruce Lee fight scene? Surely we can put Amy into that movie.
So, those are pretty well-known examples of casting. I am kind of curious, though, as an actor, was there anything ever that you felt you were just terribly miscast in as an Asian American actor?
Well, as an Asian American actor?
When you identify as Hapa, yeah?
Yes.
Yeah.
Hapa. Okay, here's one.
You gotta look me.
Okay, when I first moved to LA, I was at some showcase, and the casting director said, oh, I've got something perfect for you. It was on Santa Barbara, and I was so excited because I had never worked in LA, and, oh my God.
Santa Barbara, the soap opera?
Yeah, Santa Barbara, the soap opera. So I get there, and I get the sides, because in the old days, you didn't have, like, email or faxes. So, yeah, tell the children. So I go all the way to the casting offices at some place. I don't know. It was a long time ago. And I look at the sides, and it's a special several-part episode that's set in Nicaragua.
Nicaragua?
Yes. So I would be playing a Nicaraguan nun. Oh, my God. That was tough. Because...
Did you do the role?
I did.
Wow.
With an accent?
Yes. I had a boyfriend from Nicaragua for about 3 years, and that was my crew for about 3 years. So I felt okay about the accent.
We all want to hear it, don't we?
No, that was like 30 years ago, so...
Bless me, Father, I have sinned.
Oh, I know. Anyway, it was like a really, and I had a lot of friends in the Nicaraguan, in the Latino theater community that, I said, I got cast as a Nicaraguan nun. And they're like, oh, Amy.
A role from us.
Oh, my God. I did. I felt politically so...
People said that straight up to your face?
Yes. Well, yeah, they're my friends.
I mean, everybody was thinking it, but did they say
No,
it?
but they did. Anyway, so, but I just moved here, and I thought, oh, okay, I didn't know how to tell the casting director I'm not Latina. Because it happened all the time in San Francisco, too. People would speak to me in Spanish, and I'd say, yo soy japonés. And they go, oh, right. Anyway, like I shouldn't have said it in Spanish, huh? So, anyway, I do the part, and I'm sharing a dressing room with this Latina actress, and she's going on and on about our men and our this and our that, and I'm like, oh shit, I don't know what to say. I can't lie to her, so for weeks, and then I'm on the set, and all the extras are like, hey, ¿cómo estás? And I'm like, bien. And because I speak that much.
Oh my
So,
God.
and then the white actors on the set are looking at, because we're in, a Nicaraguan island somewhere, and they're looking at the set, and it says, like, no fumar, and they're like, what's that sign saying? No smoking. You live in L.A. Why don't you know this?
And there's a picture with it.
Yeah, probably, yeah. It was just like the stupidest, stressful experience, and I did it. And then at the very end, the actress and I are sitting in the dressing room, and she says, well, at least we have, she's continuing
Our men.
about our men. And then she says, and the trials and tribulations of being a Latina actress in LA, and she says, well, at least I have, I can do commercials in Spanish and blah, blah, blah. And I said, well, I don't really speak Spanish that well. And she goes, well, didn't your parents speak Spanish at home? And I said, well, my mom's Japanese. My dad's Finnish.
So no.
So no. I didn't even have to get that far. She was, stink eye for the rest of the day. Really bad.
After
So
she
that was the
revealed the
last time-
secrets.
The last time I crossed over to the Latino side.
Does that count as a WTF?
Yeah, that was
think I'd actually bring
WTF.
it right
That was
into
WTF.
Can we give that WTF a hand, please, everybody?
WTF. And
Yes.
oh my God.
Thank you. Thank you, gentlemen. And we want to turn it now, if we have a few moments, for questions from you all. So we hope we've gotten your wheels turning a little bit. So do people just come up to the side, or will you walk to them? Great, okay. And if you don't mind standing up so we can see you, and tell us your first name.
Hi, my name is Marielle. So this question is for the entire panel. You guys discussed that in the U.S. we tend to be very hyper-aware of our identities. Do you feel like this is something that is helpful towards diversifying representation, people of color representation into the media and to the theater arts, or do you think it's harmful?
Hyper-awareness of our racial identities or ethnic identities? Yeah. I mean, it's sort of interesting to use the term hyper-aware, right? It's not like I wake up in the morning and like I salute my Asian American flag and then,
Fuck you, man, I do.
you're a better man than I am, Phil. I mean, there's a sense in which, like, I think only people of color are asked if we're too hyper-aware of our ethnicity because, like, whiteness is the default. You don't have to be aware of it, you just are it, right? And when we actually own our identities, when we sit in our own skins, and especially when we speak from those skins, it's perceived to be somehow talking out of turn. So for me, I feel like the very fact that we're just owning ourselves, we're being willing to tell our own stories, stand up for the things that we believe in and love is a good thing. I think it's unequivocally good. I also feel like this is where maybe the conversation gets difficult, right? So I feel like every Asian American role should be cast with an Asian American. I also feel that like a lot of non-Asian roles should be cast with Asian people because there's a lot of time to make up, you know what I mean? There's like a lot of roles that have gone by that haven't gone to us. And furthermore, part of what makes Hollywood and storytelling in general interesting is that you're coming from different perspectives. We've heard so many stories that seem almost exactly the same come out of the same spaces and the same communities. It's time for us to turn those pages. That's what I think the opportunity is. So to me, pushing from that position of owning yourself and knowing and loving your stories is positive for storytelling in general. It's not just for us.
I think that it's harmful to be hyper-aware in the sense that you're only looking at the surface and you're looking for facial authenticities and such. It's harmful in that way that it limits you from absorbing another person from more than just the surface. But I actually think it's a good thing, too, if you're hyper-aware, not just your own identity, but be hyper-aware of others, too. And I agree with you. There's like the white default. Like, we know how to perform white really well. Everybody can perform white because it's been kind of like in the, every narrative we see has that kind of gist to it. And even if it's a not white story, there's still a white lens on it. And so I feel like if anything, the hyper-awareness is to, I have my lens of hyper-awareness. How can I be aware of others just as much?
And can I add white heteronormative?
White
lens.
heteronormative too, yes. All the kind of like the dominant culture narrative that we all are subscribing to because it's just subliminal there, whether we want to or not. So I just feel like sometimes can we just kind of ease down and know people from not just the skin color? And I think that the way to do that is to probably connect with values, to like really assess what your values are, and then I think you find affinities with other people that have those same values. And I think that sometimes we're just scooping off the surface when we should look deeper into our values. And then that means that you have to know yourself, too. You have to know what your values are and what is predominant. And just check in. I think like there's inventory from within that we need to keep checking. And I guess the last thing I want to say is it's just very dangerous right now because we can become a part of our narcissistic bubbles. And that hyper-awareness, I think, is really dangerous.
Thank you. Yes, who's got the next question, please? And if you don't mind standing up again and saying your name.
Sure. Hi, I'm Miri. Hi, Jeff. First of all, Amy, we were talking about the representation on screen. Your show, I literally VHS videotaped every single episode of All American Girl because it meant so much to me to be able to see my face on TV. So thank you.
Absolutely.
Why am I getting for claps? I'm sorry. I am an associate choreographer of Rent. Joy, who's sitting next to me, was the casting director for the 20th anniversary tour. And we have to cast set characters that we know who have traditionally been characters of all different races. I played Alexi Darling in the final Broadway tour. That has traditionally been an Asian American woman. And we often had these questions of, can an Asian person play Roger? Or can an Asian person play Mark? Or can an Asian person play Collins or Joanne, whose African-Americanness has been written into the role? So you kind of started to talk about sort of intra-racial casting. So we're talking about, I guess I'm thinking of like Crazy Rich Asians and that whole casting controversy of can a Taiwanese person or a Korean person play Taiwanese, or, how, and then I sort of like get stuck in my own brain and I'm like, what matters anymore? Can we have the empathy to tell each other's stories? I come from the breaking community in New York City. I'm dying about Pose. Like, I know MJ Rodriguez, I'm like so excited. And so I have been in community in the Black and Latinx communities for a really long time. And there's so many Asian people involved, and yet we're still not represented in a lot of the work that's been put out. So how do we start? I mean, we're talking, Jeff, you were saying nuance, like complication. And yeah, I'm trying to like help, jumpstart some of these stories being told, but when it comes to people in casting, when it comes to people who are, doing these things, where does the conversation go?
Where does it go next, do you
Well, I think it's, it really got stuck in, at one point was Ken Collins, was played pretty much always by a Black male, be Asian? And if he has a backstory, or if a playwright has written a backstory for a character that she has created, what how much of it can we see other people in the roles?
I'm just out of curiosity, did Hamilton change that narrative for you at all? Or for anybody?
Not really, because Hamilton was cast from the start as anyone can be in these roles. Anyone of color can tell these stories. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Although in Hamilton, I think Asians and whites can't play Hamilton.
Really? Asian?
Really?
Yeah. That's, exclusively Latino.
No, it can't be, because African American is playing Hamilton.
Yeah, Latinos and blacks can play the dominant roles, but...
And just so we know, we're running out of time, so we'll keep our answers brief, but did you want to... Go ahead, Alice. What did you want to say? But did anyone have a quick response to Mary's question?
How to change the casting into more complex...
I think it's dangerous when we're approaching it, when we try to approach something with like, what are the rules to this? Like, and when can we make the exception? I think that the really simple, and I'm sorry to simplify this, but it matters when it matters, and it doesn't matter when it doesn't. And what I mean is, like, we need to drill down every instance of this. And I think you look at something very specific, like Rent, is written in a very specific moment in time, and written for these characters, written very specifically for who they were, and it's such a diverse cast, and I think personally, to mess with that combo of the way it was intended. I think it's a little bit like somewhat disrespectful and kind of like counterintuitive to what they're trying to say. Whereas something else, like I think some other properties, other IP, as originally written, you can mess with a little bit more, but you have to interrogate all of them individually. There's no like, here are the rules to casting, and here are the rules to casting Asian Americans, because that's going to get real. Like we have to have all the conversations about that with every role, with every every film, television show. It's like it kind of
stage play.
It has to happen with with all that detail and all that attention to sort of the intention behind it, and
you have to do the work.
Yeah.
Right? If it's too easy, if the casting is the easy way to go, then it's probably not the right way to go.
There is one rule, Phil. Make money. I'm serious. Once that opens up.
And with that, I want to let you know that there's $29 tickets available for Soft Power in May with one of our wonderful, great American playwrights, David Henry Hwang, with music by Jeanine Tesori. Hopefully you saw her work in Fun Home. Ladies and gentlemen, will you please help me thanking Jeff Yang, Alice Twan, stand up everybody, Miss Amy Hill, and Mr. Phil Yu.